Hello, welcome to the G.I. Joe New News Classified Reviews. My name is David T. Allen, or if you would like, Super Dave 817. If you would like to see more of this content, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification button for future videos. Thank you and enjoy.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the G.I. Joe New News Classified Review. I'm David Allen. Thank you for everybody joining me in the chat. Good morning. We are here to talk about vintage package Gung Ho. This deviates quite a lot from the first version of Gung Ho that we got in almost, I guess, number 6 or number 7, somewhere in the classified line. So this is probably about, I would say, about 60 figures down the line, we get a second version of Gung Ho, a lot closer to the vintage version of Gung Ho. Good morning, Stephen. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, and appreciate everybody joining in the chat. So this was no different than all the other Walmart figures. It got really bent up, really dinged up in the mail. Again, we had early on a lot of the packages were sent out. And they were really crappy shipping through Walmart. They put them in the envelopes and stuff like that, and they were not very well received. This Gung Ho is a perfect example of that. Thankfully, I was able to get several Gung Ho's, several of the other vintage packaged figures as well, and so it's good that I'm opening some of these up. It gives me a chance to get them out of these packages. So again, this is very close to the vintage package version of Gung Ho. This is the original vintage 80s Gung Ho, I should say, not vintage package. Now, I showed him earlier when I did his previous version, but I'm going to pull him out of here. He's a pretty tight figure. I have all of his accessories. I have his gun, his backpack, and stuff like that. And I always felt when I got this figure as a child, this was in the early years in '83 when I was getting Gung Ho, I thought, wow, that's a very bright colored costume. Would the military want him to wear a costume like that? And apparently they did, because he's still in G.I. Joe and he's still doing good. He does change his costume over the years to a little bit darker color, more akin to this color scheme than this color scheme. If you look at stuff like Valor vs. Venom, Joe vs. Cobra, he changed his color scheme to a darker color scheme. And the comics never really portrayed him in this color scheme. The Sunbow animated series definitely did, which was a little bit more fun, tongue-in-cheek type G.I. Joe, whereas the comics were a lot seriouser. So this costume doesn't really make a lot of appearances, but it is the vintage original figure. So I wanted to compare it to the new version at the very least, to show where the homage and the history of this came from. So there you go. And he doesn't want to stand up. His legs are a little bit wobbly. So I'll put him back in his little container here. And sometimes when you get the original vintage versions of characters, they're not always the best versions. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. It just depends. Um, So we're going to open this guy up. So again, he has the Hector Greedo beautiful artwork or inspired artwork. I don't know if this is um, AI or what they're doing with these packages, but it's very inspired by the Hector Greedo vintage packaging again. And then we have the cross sell on the back, and we have the first 4 vintage figures, and Gung Ho was the last of the 4 vintage figures. We've covered Baroness, Lady J, Destro. Now Gung Ho will be the last for this batch, and then there'll be others coming after that. Let's read a little bit of his file card here. It says Lafayette Etienne R. So he's Cajun. Role Marine, Primary Military Specialist, Reconnaissance. Secondary Specialist, Jungle Warfare. Birthplace, Fer de Lance, Louisiana. So he's definitely Cajun from Louisiana. Born into a large back swamp Cajun clan, Gung Ho won a reputation as a bare knuckle brawler, joined the Marine Corps at 18, and graduated top of his class from boot camp. So there you go. There's a little bit of history of Gung Ho from his file card. All right, so we're going to open this up. I started a little bit. Again, this is the first time we're opening any of these figures, classified figures. We started from 00, and we've gone up, and now we've incorporated all of the vintage packaged figures into our reviews. With every 5 figures, we're going to review a vintage package. So we've just hit 45 in our last video. So that brings us to our next figure, and that is Gung Ho. So we're going to put that aside there, and we dropped his stand. So let me get that. There's a stand. There. All the vintage package figures come with these cool stands that helps me to keep them on there and utilize my other stands for other figures. Steven, let's see. I still never saw the Snake Eyes or Storm Shadow in the retro classified figures in stores. Yeah, I'm going to get into that in a few minutes. Well, I won't say in a few minutes. In a few videos, we will cover the Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. But the Storm Shadow, I was able to order through Walmart when they came available, and I got it. The Snake Eyes was a whole nother story. I never saw it in the U.S., and I traveled quite a bit around the United States, and I've been to plenty of Walmarts looking for that, and I never saw it. I know other people said they saw it and got the Snake Eyes. I had to order mine from overseas. My version of the vintage package Snake Eyes is a foreign version. It's obviously the same version, but there's slight little differences. When I get into that Snake Eyes, I will explain some of those differences. But I had the same difficulties. But I did order online the Zartan and Storm Shadow from the Walmart when they dropped, and I got both of those. The Snake Eyes was a different story. I did find Crimson Guard, quite an abundance of Crimson Guards. But the Snake Eyes, you're right, Stephen. That was the most difficult one of the vintage package series. The initial run, the Walmart exclusive vintage package line, that was the most difficult one to get. It took me quite a while to get that. But I do have 2 of them. I am going to open one up, and they're very rare. So it's going to be one of those videos that's I'm going to cringe when I open it because I don't want to lose the value. But that's what I've signed up for with this series of videos, so that's what we're going to do. But yeah, I feel you. I feel you, Stephen. All right, so he's got his Marine Corps hat. There you go. It's slightly different color from the other version. That was a light green. This is a dark green. right? Um, the vintage one also has a dark green hat, and then he has a more vintage inspired backpack, teal color, teal green as well. So we put that over there, and then he has um, one of his shotguns from the previous version. There. Actually, that doesn't really. This is more inspired by his vintage weapon, and it has some really cool greeble on there on both sides, where you do the cocking of the gun and stuff. There's a lot of metal greeble in there to showcase that. It looks really good. I'm glad they gave him a closer vintage version of his gun. Instead of these sci-fi versions that he came with on the first version of classified Gung Ho. And then he has a revolver. So the vintage version never had a revolver to my knowledge. Steven, you can correct me if I'm wrong because you're the accessory guy. But I don't think he ever had a revolver. He had it maybe on his pants. Or yeah, he has it on a holster in the side. So we never got that as a loose accessory. But we have it this time. We can add it to him. And then he also has a knife. Let's see. A little bit of knife. There, little knife. Uh, nope. Nope. In later years, but never vintage. Thank you. I knew you would have the answer. Then I'm going to pull the figure out of here. Excuse that noise. Packaging noise. So there you go. There's your vintage Gung Ho in all his glory. And one of the things that people had a problem with the previous one was the tattoo. So let me get the other one, the previous one, out and show you. So the vintage one has that big tattoo on his chest, that marine tattoo, and this one has a tattoo as well, but it's not. It's different. It's not exactly the same as the one that the vintage figure had. Um, see, they changed it. So I'm guessing there was a licensing thing with the Marine Corps where they changed that slightly, and they couldn't use that original Marine Corps logo anymore because I guess they have to pay to use that or something. I'm not exactly sure. So, but he has pretty much the same deco. This one's a little bit. Maybe it's because it's older and it's yellowing a little bit, but this is definitely teal, bright teal. He's got some deco, silver deco, and a little bit of green on the belt. He's got some black deco on his vest. He's got camouflage, like a dark gray camouflage. He's got some deco and of gold and black on these charges that he would use his weapon to launch. So that's on there. He's got the sheath. He's got the holster for the revolver. He's also got some bands on his wrists that are black deco as well. His face print is, let's see if his face print is different from the original version. It looks like it's the same. That head looks the same to me. From what I can tell, maybe the deco, the paint printing is slightly different shades of color, but it's the mustache is more of a handlebar mustache on the first version. This one's more of a normal mustache, but I love the thought. You can see him thinking with that face print in there. You can see the eyes and the face and everything. It looks really, really interesting that he's like thinking and he's trying to figure out something in an action that he's trying to figure out when he's working and he's doing his job and everything like that. Let's get into some of um, these articulation points. So let's see. He has the double the butterfly shoulder articulation. He's got the calf articulation. He's got the double pinned elbow. He's got the wrist. He does not have the secondary wrist. He's got the normal head articulation, the new ball joint. He's got the ab crunch and waist articulation. He's got the crotch leg articulation. He's got the thigh swivel. He's got the double pin knees. He's got the secondary ankle articulation and the foot rocker articulation there. So he's got all the main articulation points except for the second wrist articulation. So that's pretty good for a big bulky figure like this. And I must say, it looks really good. I like the paint apps on his arms. It looks really good overall. Let's put some of these accessories on him. Let's start with his dagger. So I'm going to put that in the sheath. He's got one on his ankle, the sheath for the knife on his ankle there. Now let me see if the vintage version has that. Yeah, he has a knife sheath on his ankle there. So that's good. Let's see. Then we're going to put his revolver in his holster on his right leg. There. So we got his holster, his revolver in his holster. We got his knife in his sheath there. Let's see. We're going to put his cover on. There's his cover. I'm going to put his backpack. Now, trying to get these backpacks through these secondaries is a pain in the neck. I'll say that much. You can never get them in properly. So there it is. He's got his backpack on through the secondary into the back peg holster, peg hole. So then he's going to get his launcher here. I'm going to put it in this arm. There. And there you have him. Hey, Sean Jones, good morning. Thanks for joining the chat. So there's Gung Ho. We're talking about vintage package Gung Ho. And so let's take him back out of here and do a comparison of this next to his other version. Let's see. So there's the vintage version, and there's the vintage package classified version. I think it's pretty close. Obviously, the backpack's slightly different, and like I said, I think my Gung Ho's got a little yellowing in there of him, but it's very, very vintage inspired. A lot more than the first classified version. And I said this before: the first version of the classified figures were going off of Operation Blackout. So a lot of those figures were a lot more futuristic, a lot more sci-fi. Classified was going for a different aesthetic early on with these figures. Uh, it's a nice figure. It's just not. It's definitely not what I was expecting. They 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 went back a little bit. They took it more to a more a classified version instead of this futuristic sci-fi version of the figures, and I think that was the right decision. And then they went back further for the vintage versions of the figures, and that's where we get this gung ho from. This is definitely much more vintage than this, and I think eventually I hope we get another gung ho that's a little bit further down from that's more in the middle of these two uh, perspectives. Not as much sci-fi, high technology, but a little bit further down that's classified, but not quite vintage. So I hope we get another gung ho at some point, at middle, someplace in the middle for gung ho, um, because I would like to see what a actual real classified version of gung ho looks like, so we can get a more traditional. And that's the problem with classified, because the early years they were kind of all over the place. Um, so you get a lot of vintage versions of characters, but then you don't get them in the vintage package, and then you get classified versions, but then get um, you get those sci-fi versions. Thankfully, Scarlet, Duke, Roadblock, we were able to get new versions, uh, mm, and there were much better versions of them, um, classified versions, and um, and vintage versions. Oh well, I put him on that stand, but he was supposed to go on his other stand. I put him on the wrong stand. Oh well, it's not a biggie. Um, so, what do you guys think in the chat? Do you think this is a good upgrade? Do you think they went too vintage with it? Even though it was the vintage package, I guess we should expect that it's going to be more vintage in the vintage package and less vintage as a classified. Or do you think we should get another gung ho, a much more classified version of gung ho? Uh, I'd like to see the 92 version with the flag. Oh, yeah. The brown, where he was wearing all the brown, and then they did that other copy of it, and they made it really weird looking, the second version of that. Yeah, I think that would be an interesting version. Maybe that would be an opportunity to get another gung ho, but then do it more classified and get it to a middle ground. Yeah, that's a good point, Stephen. That's an interesting looking figure. Um, they, I don't know why they did that second version of that. The second version of that is terrible, but the first version it actually is good. You're right. A lot of those figures from that era they redecoed later and re-released a lot of them, and some of those versions are harder to get than others, depending upon the release, where you are, and where you were able to purchase them. If I'm not mistaken, there, right, Stephen? Um, but yeah, that's a good that, and then we get a different figure, and then it's a different version of Gung Ho. I think that's a good idea, because I think this one is a lot similar to the Valor versus Venom, Joe versus Cobra, with maybe a little bit less of the technology and the sci-fi elements, but it is very similar to those. Um, I don't have an example right close to show that off, but I believe he looks a lot like that. So yeah, I think there's room for another Gung Ho. It's similar to what they're doing with Major Blood, where they released the Major Blood, but it was a Target exclusive, and it was a lot more classified version, and now the new version looks more like, in my opinion, Python, more the Python version of Major Blood from the 90s. And so we need a vintage version, a much more vintage Major Blood. So there's room for these characters to get re-released, a lot of these characters to get re-released. I mentioned it with Recondo the other day, where they did the Tiger Force Recondo, then they did a vintage package Recondo that was very close to the vintage, but I would like to get a Recondo that's more of a classified up Recondo and not Tiger Force, not vintage. So he's in the same place I think that Gung Ho is, except Gung Ho got a vintage package and a more sci-fi-ish version and not a Tiger Force. So there's room for the releasing of these characters again, and I hope Classified gives us these characters so we can get the perfect version. I hate to call it that. I hate to call it the perfect version, but that's what I'm calling the classified versions. The classified up, where they've got the right deco, right accessories. They have the homage of the vintage, but they're a step up from that vintage, and they're much more modern, but not so far that they're so sci-fi and they have all these lasers and this and that. Even though I like those, I know the audience is not going to respond to that. So there's definitely some room for a lot of these characters to get to that position. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm crazy, or do you think I'm on track for that, or do you think Hasbro should just do whatever they want to do, and you guys don't care what I have to say? Because it is unique that some characters have vintage, some don't, some have the sci-fi update. Like, for example, here's another example: is Gung Ho is Roadblock version 2. Now we got two versions of Roadblock version 2. We got the regular version, which has the lasers and all that, and then we got the running variant that's a little bit more subdued version of that. Is that something that we should maybe get another Gung Ho that's more subdued, like that Roadblock was? That you can get this figure here, but do it like they did with the running variants, and they take out all the silver elements and the gold elements and the blue elements and make it more darker, like blacks and grays and stuff like that, and give him maybe a little bit more accessories. Because we did not get a running variant of Gung Ho. We only got Snake Eyes, Roadblock, Duke, technically Scarlet, and Destro as well. Steven. Honestly, I'd like to see more of the minor characters made instead of 3 to 4 Cobra Commanders, 4 to 5 Snake Eyes, etc. Yeah, definitely, definitely. But you've been a fan of this line for a very long time, so in order to get some new stuff, we have to pay for some reuse, redecode versions of these characters, and that's the whole reason why they're doing the vintage package line, is to get money so they can make things we've never gotten, like hardball. I use that as an example. We did the um the bazooka, the Tiger Force bazooka. That's the perfect buck to do hardball, because it has the jersey, it has the fatigues, and he was another heavy gunner type guy with that Gatling gun. Oh, the difference is he would have a ball cap, and he'd be an African American person with a head instead of a Caucasian person. So I think hardball is a very easy character to redeco using that buck of that bazooka buck. Uh, but there's very, very little reuse, only paint deco, and definitely a new head. Um, so that's where they're having to reuse, redeco, repaint a lot of this stuff in order to get more money for the line to grow and to get new parts and new molds built. Because there are definitely characters that have a lot more new molds, like Pythona. That's a fairly 100% new mold for Pythona. And there's a couple other characters that are I would say maybe a little bit of hit and run, maybe a little bit of lifeline. Big Lob, obviously, maybe he would have that same chest part as the bazooka, but his legs are going to be a new mold, and that costs money to make new molds, so they have to sell other decos and other versions of characters in order to make more money so they can afford to get those new molds, and so on and so forth. Just my theory on the scenario. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty close to that accurate way of doing stuff. Um, but overall, I think this vintage version of Gung Ho turned out great. It's very close to his vintage, and it's a very nice upgrade to the first version of Gung Ho. I think it's just I would have liked to have gotten a more classified version in the middle again. Um, all right. Any more questions? Any more comments you guys want me to field in this chat? This is going to be a fairly small video because vintage packages figures aren't going to take that long to go through. We don't have a lot of comparisons. I think Gung Ho's first appearance in Sunbow was Mass Device Episode 1. He appeared in A Real American Hero. I believe issue 13 was his first appearance, Larry Hama, in the 80s. And that does it, I think. So thank you guys again for watching. I appreciate it. We're going to be going into a little bit more repaints for the next video with another character that we're going to be doing, covering another group of cobras, redecoed cobras this time, and should be an interesting one because some of these redecos on these particular cobras are really fun. I enjoy them, actually, to be honest. But I look forward to that. That's going to be number 56 is coming up next. Then after that, we got some big heavy hitters. That'll be some really good videos coming for those. So thanks again. And we will talk to you guys next time. And this is another G.I. Joe. Finally, we got another G.I. Joe. We don't have a lot of Joe ones, but this is another G.I. Joe. So, yo, Joe. See you in the next one.